I'm a doctor, but I can't think clearly anymore, so I can't do my job.
Long COVID causes debilitating cognitive issues.
I'm a runner, but now I can't walk 100 feet without getting exhausted.
Long COVID causes crippling fatigue that may last a lifetime.
I've lost friendships because of long COVID. I just don't feel well enough to see people.
People may look outwardly healthy, but they're suffering from a physical disorder that can upend lives.
Everything hurts. I can't even go out and play.
Up to 30% of COVID patients develop long COVID, and right now, there's no cure and little understanding.
I can't focus, I can't think straight, I can't keep a job.
So for those suffering daily, there's just one urgent question.
How long?
How long?
How long?
How long?
Until we solve long COVID. The Solve Long COVID initiative is bringing together patients, researchers, doctors, and drug developers to find answers now. To learn more and see how you can help, go to solvelongcovid.org.
It's wonderful to be here on this panel speaking to everyone. I'm so grateful to you all for inviting me and giving me this chance to talk. The particular challenges are pretty manifold, right? On the one hand, there is this pre-existing history of bias and dismissal toward patients with ME/CFS, chronic Lyme, even fibromyalgia, and now even long COVID we've seen, right? And that bias emerges out of the fact that, about many facts, but one of them being that some of these diseases we haven't studied very deeply. And they're hard, as we know, to measure using conventional kind of surface level tools of medicine. And so medicine is left with trying to think about people whose bodies live at the edge of medical knowledge. And historically, medicine has done a terrible job of that. But too often the media coverage of these illnesses doesn't even acknowledge that systemic structural reality that shapes the entire way that we think about how science and clinicians from the abstract to the kind of on the ground treat patients with ME/CFS, treat patients with long COVID, treat in every sense of the word, right, in terms of affect and actual care. So I think that the first thing that the media needs to do is that the person writing about these conditions has to have really inform themselves about the deeper structural realities that have shaped not only what medicine knows and doesn't know about these conditions, but patients' own experiences. And that will help journalists have an understanding of why patient frustration exists that I find sometimes startlingly absent in pieces that I read. So I noticed a couple of problems that crop up over and over in pieces about ME/CFS, Lyme disease, long COVID, and the list goes on, right? And one of those problems is that there's often this implicit and uninterrogated or unexamined impulse to equate advocacy with being anti-science. And one of the things that I said recently in a Twitter thread I wrote about the recent New York Magazine piece in which Emily is quoted about ME/CFS and long COVID was that piece treated advocacy as though it were a dirty word, right? There was a moment where it said, some scientists were frustrated that advocacy had won. And what was really meant was that, anti-science had won, right? But none of that was quite brought to the surface. So there was this way in which the piece and many pieces like it often set up what we call straw man as a journalist and an editor. I'm taught not to set up straw men. And pieces that I see in the media constantly set up straw men. So the straw man is advocates are angry, so therefore they are irrational and anti-science. And one of the things that I tried to convey in my piece is that there's a long history of media painting advocates and patients as irrational, not just in ME/CFS or long COVID, but when we look at the history of HIV/AIDS, right? The other point that I think the media often misses is that patients more than anyone want science and really good science. What patients are frustrated by is bad science, lack of funding, poorly designed trials, the kind of wild absence of intellectual curiosity about these diseases that leads to kind of the same old recycled ideas about psychology cropping up over and over. So that's one kind of problem I see. I see another kind of problem over and over, which is that often the patients or the people living with disease who are selected as representatives are either in some way extreme and at an extreme edge, which is to say they may present as being especially irrational, right? They may reject certain tenets of basic science, as opposed to the journalists selecting what I think is a much larger group of people, patient advocates who believe in science and just want better science, right? So I've seen that. Also, we see sometimes patients selected who don't have very extreme versions of the disease in the sense that they're not that sick. So you get in the media a portrait of people who are mildly ill. But I think, one of the things that I really struggled with when I was writing The Invisible Kingdom is how do we as writers make chronic illness that is characterized by poorly characterized symptoms, so to speak, like brain fog, like fatigue, how do we make that dramatic and distinct on the page, right? When we don't even yet have the full vocabulary for what's happening in the body. And one way I tried to do that was really by slowing down and trying to explain to the reader in a kind of blow by blow way what this was really like. And all too often, I just don't see that effort of imagining patients' reality, of listening to patients being made. So one of the chief things the media needs to do is deeply listen to patients, hear the drama in what they're saying, hear the severity in what they're saying, and get that on the page. Another thing I want to add is that often these pieces do, what I call funny things with gender, which is to say that they'll often include a quote from saying, well, most of the people who have these diseases are women and they're middle class and they're white. Again, in order to imply that this is part of a larger tradition that goes back to hysteria and is, included in somatoform disorder. So all in the service of implying that there's something psychological here being driven by a very particular kind of person who is privileged, white and middle-aged, and a woman. And it's pretty clearly implicitly trading in misogyny, right? And it's, again, often very uninterrogated. A very similar moment happened in the recent New York Magazine piece. And any journalist worth their salt should see that statement and quote and do some of their own digging, because as soon as you start to dig, you find that the picture is much more complicated, but that often, people of color aren't getting care they need. People in rural areas aren't getting the care they need. And also that there are scientific reasons why women might suffer from autoimmune diseases more often than men. We know that's the case. So there may be scientific factors driving the fact that we're seeing more women as long COVID patients, for example. So there's, real science to dig into there that's often left on the table. I think it has been a legitimizing force and that it has raised awareness. One thing we know is that clearly there's a lot of funding, right? Compared to, I think, ME/CFS at certain points, compared to Lyme at many points, there's just a lot of funding. That's not to say there shouldn't be more, but there's money and there's attention. The scope of the problem of long COVID has definitely shined a light on this broader problem of infection-associated complex illness. That's not to say that there's not a lot more work to be done. There is. But I think in addition to shining a light on it, it's offering this really concrete benefit, which is that there was a lot of bad science done around Lyme disease where scientists would look at the prevalence of symptoms in Lyme patients and say, oh, actually the general population also has aches and pains and also experiences fatigue. And one of the things I've noticed in long COVID research is that there'll be findings that say, oh, the general population also has these. But then the researchers keep digging and find out ways to differentiate and to show, but our patients also have these 5 other symptoms, right, that go beyond fatigue, that go beyond brain fog, and their prevalence is higher. And so there's much more intellectual curiosity and kind of ferment around, what is driving these conditions than I think there was certainly 20, 30, 40 years ago. I think it's totally understandable and human to feel this way. I feel a little pang of it too, as a person with, complicated tick-borne illness. But I do think that over time that it's not that it's a trickle-down economy, but that in fact there are these overlapping mechanisms, right? That, as I was just saying, are going to help shine a light more broadly on all of these conditions. And I also think put templates in place for better science to be done that really will benefit us. The other thing I would say quite simply is that scientists think there may be some overlap between some of these conditions or susceptibility to some of them, right? If you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you may be more susceptible to POTS, et cetera. And speaking for myself, I can say I have long COVID now, right? I got COVID this summer for the first time, and I have long COVID, and it's distinct from my tick-borne illness. But my tick-borne illness probably paved the way for me to be more susceptible, or something about what made me susceptible to not getting over tick-borne illness is part of why I'm not getting over COVID. So in the end, I am grateful for, and I hope that we can all find a way to kind of keep using our voices to say we still need research into these other conditions, right? But to see this hopefully as the tide that's lifting all boats, I hope. But I think that's going to require us continuing to lift our voices about all of them.